Bulgaria has one of the most ignored reputations in NATO. Say the word Bulgaria, and most people load a very specific mental image. Rose fields, yogurt, a vague memory from a geography class they were not fully present for. And that is exactly the problem. Because while everyone was busy watching the big players, America repositioning carrier groups, Germany finally remembering it has a defense budget, Poland buying everything with a gun on it, Bulgaria quietly did something that nobody expected from a country most Europeans could not confidently locate on a map without a 15-minute warm-up. It became one of NATO's most strategically useful members on the most dangerous flank the alliance has. Not by being large, not by spending like a superpower, not by giving dramatic speeches at summits while producing nothing behind the scenes. By sitting exactly where the alliance needs someone to sit. By modernizing exactly the capability NATO cannot afford to lose. And by planting itself on the edge of a body of water that went from a regional footnote to one of the most contested stretches of water on Earth the moment Russia decided Ukraine was a problem it needed to solve by force. The Black Sea is no longer a quiet corner of the map, and Bulgaria is no longer a quiet corner of NATO. That matters more than almost anyone is saying out loud. Now, before we get to the serious strategic argument, and there is one, we need to acknowledge something first. Because no video about Bulgarian military power is complete without addressing the elephant in the room, which is that Bulgaria has spent most of its post-Cold War history being the alliance member everyone quietly hoped would not show up to a real crisis in Soviet-era equipment, and then asked to borrow spare parts. That reputation was not entirely unfair. Bulgaria's armed forces for much of the 1990s and 2000s were essentially a museum with the flag. MiG-29s that required Russian maintenance, T-72 tanks that had seen better decades, a defense budget that treated military spending the way most people treat gym memberships, technically committed, practically ignored. Bulgarian defense spending had the energy of someone who signs up for a marathon, buys the shoes, and then never actually runs. But here's the thing about countries that have been underestimated long enough. Eventually, they stop caring what you think and start making moves. And Bulgaria's moves, quietly, methodically, and with an urgency that only makes sense once you look at what Russia did to its neighbor, have been genuinely significant. Let us start with the numbers, because the numbers are where most people stop paying attention, which is a mistake. Bulgaria's armed forces field roughly 30,000 active duty personnel. On paper, that sounds modest. On paper, Bulgaria looks like a country that shows up to NATO meetings, nods politely, and hopes the larger members handle everything. But that framing is wrong for the same reason it is wrong about Portugal, about Denmark, about every small alliance member that chose depth over mass. Bulgaria is not trying to win a land war alone. Nobody is asking it to. What NATO actually needs on its southeastern flank is not another Germany. What it needs is a reliable node, a country that can host allied forces, move equipment across its territory quickly, keep eyes on the Black Sea, police the southeastern air corridor, and plug into alliance systems without requiring a 3-year transition period and an emergency training program. That is exactly what Bulgaria is building. And the centerpiece of that build, the acquisition that changes the entire conversation about Bulgarian air power, is the F-16 Block 70. If you want to understand why the F-16 Block 70 purchase matters, you first need to understand what Bulgaria was flying before, MiG-29s. Which sounds fine until you realize that flying MiG-29s in a NATO alliance creates a very specific and very uncomfortable problem. The maintenance ecosystem for a MiG-29 runs through Russia. The technical documentation runs through Russia. The spare parts availability runs through Russia, which means every time a Bulgarian MiG-29 needed serious work, Bulgaria was functionally dependent on the country NATO is now treating as its primary threat. That is the geopolitical equivalent of asking your enemy to service your fire alarm. The F-16 Block 70 purchase ends that dependency completely. These are not old airframes pulled from storage and given a fresh coat of paint. The Block 70 is the most advanced version of the F-16 currently in production. It carries an active electronically scanned array radar, the kind of system that can track multiple targets simultaneously, distinguish between them, and hand-targeting data to allied systems in real time. It has extended range fuel capacity, updated avionics, and compatibility with the full range of NATO precision munitions. Bulgaria is not buying a legacy aircraft. It is buying a platform that will be relevant well into the 2040s. And the timing is not accidental. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 sent a very specific message to every NATO member on the eastern and southeastern flanks. The message was, the threat is real, it moves fast, and the countries that are still operating Soviet-era systems when it arrives are going to have a very bad time. Bulgaria received that message. The F-16 program is no longer a plan for the future. It is the reality of the present. By late 2025, the first 8 Block 70s were officially delivered to Graf Ignatievo Air Base. This isn't a punchline for 2035, it's an active squadron. For the first time since the Cold War, Bulgaria isn't just asking for air policing, it's providing the high-end AESA radar coverage NATO needs to keep eyes on the Russian-controlled sectors of the Black Sea. The F-16 transition is only one piece of what Bulgaria is doing. The land forces modernization is running in parallel. The roughly 160 T-72M and T-72M1 tanks in active service are being evaluated for upgrades. Artillery systems are being reviewed for compatibility with NATO fire control and targeting networks. The Pander-style shift toward lighter, faster, more deployable formations that other small NATO members have already made is being studied and partially adopted. Bulgaria is not building an army that can win a European land war by itself. It is building an army that can hold ground, receive allied reinforcement, and integrate with NATO command structures without creating the kind of interoperability nightmare that turns a crisis response into a logistics argument. That is the doctrine. And it is the right doctrine for a country of 10 million people sitting on NATO's southeastern corner. But hardware only explains half of why Bulgaria matters. The other half is something you cannot buy. Bulgaria sits on the western coast of the Black Sea. And the Black Sea in 2026 is not the quiet regional body of water it was 20 years ago. It is a pressure zone. Russia's war in Ukraine turned it into a live operational environment. Ukrainian Neptune missiles sank the Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, in 2022. Ukrainian naval drones have struck Russian vessels and port infrastructure repeatedly since then. The Black Sea has become a testing ground for a new kind of naval warfare that nobody fully planned for, and everybody is now studying intensely. And Bulgaria is watching all of it from the western shore. That proximity is not comfortable, but it is strategically valuable because NATO needs members on that coastline who can contribute to surveillance, mine countermeasures, and alliance coordination in a body of water that connects to the Turkish Straits, touches Ukraine, and sits directly adjacent to Russia's southern military infrastructure. Bulgaria is one of 3 NATO members with Black Sea coastline. Romania is another. Turkey is the third, and Turkey's relationship with the alliance deserves its own video, its own therapist, and possibly its own support group, which means Bulgaria and Romania are doing the reliable anchor work on that coastline. That is not a small thing. That is a structural role in alliance security that no amount of tank counting or budget comparison can fully capture. Here is where Bulgaria stops looking like a modernizing middle-tier member and starts looking like something more specific, a linchpin. Not in the dramatic Hollywood sense. There are no Bulgarian generals giving speeches in front of large maps while orchestral music plays. The Bulgarians are not that kind of country. They are more the kind of country that quietly shows up to the trilateral naval exercise, does the mine countermeasure work competently, says very little to the press, and then goes back to Sofia to argue about domestic politics with an enthusiasm that makes Italian coalition management look calm. But the strategic function is real. Bulgaria is part of a trilateral mine countermeasures arrangement with Romania and Turkey focused on Black Sea security. That cooperation matters because the Black Sea has a mine problem. Naval mines, some of them legacy Cold War ordnance, some of them more recent, have been detected drifting in Black Sea waters since Russia's war in Ukraine escalated. Commercial shipping has been affected. Alliance planning has had to account for it. Mine countermeasures sounds unglamorous. It does not trend on social media. Nobody makes action films about it, but mines close sea lanes. Mines sink merchant vessels. Mines create the kind of slow-motion crisis that does not generate dramatic headlines, but gradually strangles the economic and military logistics of an entire region. The countries that can find them, identify them, and remove them are performing a function that is genuinely irreplaceable. Bulgaria is one of those countries. Cross-border military mobility in southeastern Europe has historically been a bureaucratic nightmare. Different rail gauges, different border protocols, different national procedures for moving heavy equipment, all of which conspire to turn a rapid reinforcement plan into a slow-motion logistics argument. Bulgaria is working with Romania and Greece to fix that. It is unglamorous work that never trends on social media. It is also the kind of work that determines whether NATO's reinforcement concept actually functions under pressure or just looks good in a PowerPoint. That is a different category of contribution than most people associate with a country whose primary cultural exports until recently were roses and a dairy product with unusually strong probiotic claims. Now let us address Russia directly, because the Russia question is where Bulgaria's strategic position becomes genuinely complicated. Bulgaria has a history with Russia that is not simple. For much of the 19th century, Russia was the power that helped Bulgaria break free from Ottoman rule. That history created a cultural and political affinity that did not disappear when the Cold War ended or when Bulgaria joined NATO in 2004. There is a strand of Bulgarian political opinion, represented in parliament, present in the media, occasionally loud, that views Russia with something closer to sympathy than the alliance line officially prefers. That internal tension is real. It has affected how quickly Bulgaria has moved on some defense decisions. It has occasionally created friction with partners who wanted faster, cleaner alignment. But here is what has happened since February 2022. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine did not just change the military calculus for Bulgaria. It changed the political one. The images of Busa, the strikes on civilian infrastructure, the scale of destruction that Russia brought to a neighboring Slavic country. And these landed differently in Bulgaria than abstract alliance arguments about threat assessments had for years. The F-16 program, which had been moving at the pace of a committee discussing a committee's findings, accelerated. Defense spending crossed 2% of GDP. The Bulgarian government's public positioning on Russia hardened noticeably. A country that had been carefully managing two directions at once started making clearer choices. It means that when the threat became undeniable, Bulgaria moved. In the characteristically Bulgarian way, approximately 3 times more debate than necessary, somehow still producing a result, but it moved. And that movement is visible on the Black Sea coastline most of all. Bulgaria is not abstractly exposed to Russian pressure. It is sitting front row of a live naval war, watching whose ships move freely and whose cannot. Bulgarian coastal radars are watching that water. Bulgarian naval vessels are operating in it. Bulgarian air power, increasingly F-16 capable rather than MiG dependent, can reach it. And Bulgarian territory provides the westernmost NATO anchor on a coastline that the alliance needs to hold if the southeastern flank is going to mean anything in a serious crisis. Russia cannot be comfortable with that. A Bulgaria that was neutrally drifting, slowly modernizing, and carefully avoiding alignment was manageable from Moscow's perspective. A Bulgaria that has broken its Soviet-era Air Force dependency, upgraded its ground forces doctrine, deepened trilateral Black Sea cooperation, and accelerated NATO integration is a different kind of problem. Not because Bulgaria is going to invade anyone, because Bulgaria, sitting where it sits, doing what it is now doing, makes the southeastern flank harder to pressure, harder to split, and harder to exploit. And that for a country of 10 million people with a defense budget measured in billions rather than hundreds of billions is a remarkable strategic outcome. The real argument for why Bulgaria matters is simple. Ask what NATO's southeastern flank looks like without it. The answer is considerably worse. Remove Bulgaria from the Black Sea equation, and Romania is the only reliable NATO anchor on that coastline. Remove Bulgarian air power from the southeastern corridor, and the gap between NATO's Central European coverage and the Turkish Straits becomes real and exploitable. Remove Bulgarian participation from the trilateral mine countermeasures arrangement, and the Black Sea mine threat has fewer resources tracking it. Bulgaria is not irreplaceable the way a superpower is irreplaceable, but it is indispensable in a more specific and harder to substitute way. It is the kind of indispensable that comes from being exactly the right capability in exactly the right place. Portugal figured this out with the Atlantic. Estonia figured it out with cyber. Bulgaria is figuring it out with the Black Sea and the southeastern flank. Small countries that identify the gap, fill it competently, and sit in the geography nobody else can replicate. Those countries punch far above their weight in alliance politics, in operational planning, and in the quiet calculations that determine whose voice gets taken seriously when the map becomes a real problem rather than a briefing slide. There is one more layer to this that most people miss completely. Bulgaria's modernization is not just a Bulgarian story, it is a demonstration effect. When a country managing Soviet-era dependency, internal political division, and a complicated history with Russia still manages to deliver F-16s, cross 2% defense spending, and deepen Black Sea cooperation in 3 years, it sends a message to every alliance member that has been slow-walking its commitments. The message is simple. It is possible. It is just uncomfortable. Bulgaria did not do this gracefully. There were delays, parliamentary fights, and moments where the program looked like it might die in a committee somewhere between the Defense Ministry and the Finance Ministry, where good ideas go to wait indefinitely. But the planes arrived, the budget crossed 2%, the work is ongoing. And a country that spent most of the post-Cold War period being politely ignored in NATO conversations is now sitting on the most contested flank the alliance has, with new air power, a Black Sea role nobody else can easily fill, and a strategic position that becomes more valuable every year the war in Ukraine continues. So, the next time someone mentions Bulgaria and reaches for the rose fields and yogurt mental image, you might want to suggest they look at a map instead, not the political map with borders and capitals. The strategic map, the one that shows the Black Sea, the southeastern NATO flank, the gap between Central European coverage and the Turkish Straits, and the small countries sitting at every choke point that the alliance cannot afford to lose. Because on that map, Bulgaria does not look like a footnote, it looks like a cornerstone. A small country, a focused military, a strategic position that the alliance needs and that Russia cannot ignore. Which is, when you think about it, almost the same trick Portugal pulled with the Atlantic. Different ocean, different history, same logic, be indispensable. And in NATO, where the real currency is not just spending percentages, but actual operational contribution in the places that matter, Bulgaria has quietly, stubbornly, and against most people's expectations become exactly that. The world probably did not see it coming, which, for a country that has spent centuries surprising people, feels about right.